There's a very important concept that I'm going to talk about today, and I call it teach people how to treat you. This is a valuable concept that really centers around setting boundaries for how you want to be treated in your communication, your personal, your professional life. Um, and it really requires that you assert your needs early on in the relationship. Now, this can be done in the middle of a relationship, but it's a little more difficult than at the start of a relationship. So if you're a new CFO, if you have a new employee, if you're just entering the business, this is very easy to do. If you're in the middle, which most of us are or have been, it's a little more difficult and will take some repetition, but it still can be done. And this is best shown by an example during in one of my corporate turnarounds. So early in my career, I did about a little over 2 decades of turnarounds where I was called in by a bank, a private equity firm, shareholders, et cetera, for a company that was nearing bankruptcy. So it's on its downturn, its major downturn. And as a professional, it was very important for me to walk in day one, take the keys, assert my professionalism and the direction of the company, get all the onboard terrorists off that plane, and really set an example of how this company was going to be run from today forward. So this is when I lived in the Pacific Northwest. It was a sawmill, forest products company in Southwest Washington. So the bank had called me in. I was working with the owner, family-run company, for about 2 days before I was introduced to the employees and the management of this company. So in our first meeting, it was a company-wide meeting, and the general manager of this sawmill, great guy, was a former military person, very knowledgeable about forest products. About 6 feet 6 inches tall, shaved head, mean look, tight hat, et cetera, et cetera. And in the first meeting, I had spoken for about 15 minutes about my goal, the company's goals, what was going on financially, how this was going to run. And the general manager stood up, very, very imposing man, and he said, "I got one question for you." And I said, "Of course." And he asked, "What exactly will you be getting into in my sawmill?" So it was my sawmill. And very important there is, as he was the leader of this company, as a general manager, ran the company from an operational standpoint. But all the employees of this company are there at this time. So this is a moment, this is a defining moment in this, not only my job, but this company's life. And so I had prepared for this. I'd been through this before, and I said that's a great question. And I said his name, and I won't say here, but I said I will only be involved in operational items that directly affect cash. And the general manager said, "Well, that's good. I run this tight ship, blah blah blah." And he sat down, and so I continued the talk. And about 10 minutes later, he raised his hand again, and he stood up and he said, "Well, sir, everything I do from an operational standpoint affects cash." And I said, "You're exactly right. I am in your soup. We're going to cover everything. We're going to fix this company, and we're going to turn this around." And so I was prepared for that moment. Had I not been prepared and basically scripted out what my answers were to the various parties that I thought were going to ask these questions in this open forum, I believe we would have failed. So being prepared and showing them how I was to be taught and that I had the keys and that I was in charge was extremely important. Now, GM and I worked together very well after we broke that ice. We did end up turning the company around, and actually so well that the owner sold it for a 8-digit profit after about 15 months, at 15 or 18 months. So it worked out very well. But anyway, the point of teaching people how to treat you is pretty well illustrated by that. So there's 5 key elements to teaching people how to treat you. Number 1, it's boundaries. Know your boundaries and respect other people's boundaries. Number 2, it's communication. Do it clearly and concisely. Number 3 is you must have consequences for non-performance or non-adherence. Number 4 is lead by example. What's best for you is also best for others. And then number 5 is really what I call self-care. If you're walking that walk, talking the talk, live to that expectation. So I want to get into each of those pretty quickly. Number one, boundaries. Take the time before the event happens. Like I said, I was prepared for this meeting. Take the time to determine what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. Consider your emotional, your physical, and your social boundaries in those instances. And so I'm the way I was brought up. I'm the youngest of seven. Um, I'm used to physical contact. I'm used to confrontation. I'm okay with constructive confrontation. As a matter of fact, I kind of live off that sometimes. So my boundaries are a little closer than others, but I have to respect other people's boundaries if theirs are, and most people are or have extended boundaries over mine. Number two is the communication. Once you've identified your boundaries, these must be expressed to everybody. They don't know your boundaries, and so that those boundaries must be communicated clearly and concisely, and consistently. Consistency is critical. Excuse me. So if you have the boundary one day, that boundary must be the same the next day, the next day, and the next day. Now, over time, these boundaries can break down, and there's more open communication. But initially, setting those boundaries is key to be consistent at that point. Number three is, excuse me, is consequences. Now, it's like a parent. If you tell your child you've got 1 hour of screen time and they go do 4 hours and you don't have any teeth in that punishment, the 4 hours are going to happen every day. So consequences must be fair and appropriate. The time should fit the crime, as they say. And so stating those and enforcing those consequences of non-adherence is a huge key. Number four, lead by example. Say what you mean what you say. Enough said there. And then as far as number five, the self-care is really take care of yourself. If you can't take care of yourself, at least show that you can do that in front of others. And it's very difficult as a CFO, as a C-level professional, to always keep our shit together, basically. But you've got to do that in front of others, because once you lose something like that, you lose that credibility and those boundaries go away. And teaching people how to treat you is completely pushed aside. And the power goes back to the person who is coming to you, not held by you making those boundaries. Um, it's an ongoing process. I think it may take time, especially like I mentioned at the beginning. If you are in the middle of a relationship and you're changing the rules, that will take time. That makes the consistency and the communication even more important. So be patient, be consistent in your efforts, and prioritize relationships that revolve around mutual respect and understanding, and that will get you pretty close to where you want to be.